Good morning and welcome back. This is World Talks coming to you live from Warsaw. I'm Salia Strzemska. NATO's military committee, the alliance's highest military authority, wrapped up its meeting in Latvia on Saturday. President Edgars Rinkēvičs used the occasion to urge NATO to step up protection of the Baltic states. His call comes as Europe faces a series of airspace violations. To discuss the importance of this meeting, I'm joined by Stefan Korshak, Senior Defense Correspondent, Kyiv Post. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
So this has been a meeting at the highest military level in NATO. We have heard concluding remarks. What are the key takeaways?
Well, that NATO perceives the threat and that NATO is taking it seriously, that NATO does not seem to think that the Russians will somehow back off or behave in a peaceful manner, that more aggression is expected, and that should eventually produce effective response by NATO to contain the threat.
Latvia and also Lithuania are now pushing to turn air policing in the Baltics into a full air defense mission. So what rules of engagement would change under that shift, and how big of a deal is that change?
That's an excellent question. Rules of engagement are very complicated instructions that are created for any particular situation and set of circumstances. So exactly how the NATO nations involved would set up rules of engagement is hard to nail down precisely. But in general, it would change from an air policing mission, which is watch and observe and make sure that nothing gets through that is not undetected, to knock it down, get rid of it, deal with it, turn it back. And it's a much more aggressive interception-based type of strategy. It requires more resources, it takes more risk, and the qualification is that in order to make it effective, well, you have to have the resources to do it, and NATO certainly has the resources to deal with a Russian Air Force incursion with multiple aircraft trying to bomb or missile something. It's not nearly so clear that NATO has the capacity properly to stop a large number of Russian drones. And so where that capacity is going to come from and how that will fit into rules of engagement, very open questions.
Right. I mean, just to follow up on that, I mean, asked about the possibility of change to air defense missions. So Admiral Giuseppe Cavo-Dragone, chair of the NATO Military Committee, said it would be premature to take such a decision now. And you've partially answered this, but I wanted to perhaps expand. Why this reluctance? Do you feel that he might fear escalation?
That's certainly a factor. The counter would, of course, be that if Russian aircraft, manned or unmanned, are encroaching into NATO airspace, the escalation isn't coming from NATO. But that's almost legal talk. The real question, the real point is that NATO, I think, as an organization, understands very well it has a very long history of not making promises that it cannot fulfill. So if it's going to set up a more vigorous and effective air defense network, let's say in the Baltic region or along Poland's border, then it has to be effective. And NATO can't, as an organization, simply say, well, we're going to stop everything, or we're going to intercept everything, or we're going to prevent anything from coming over the border when they may not have the capacity to do it. And what that capacity is, how gaps in those capacities might be filled, when that all might happen, open questions. And so the people who are responsible, logically, are going to be hesitant about making any kind of hard commitment without those kinds of questions answered.
And another thing that Cavo-Dragone was asked during a press conference following the meeting was a potential withdrawal of American troops from NATO's eastern flank. I mean, how plausible is that scenario?
Well, it's certainly plausible. The Americans have become a very unreliable member of NATO compared to the type of behavior and commitment that they've shown over the past, whatever it is, 80 years. And no NATO state could look to its national security policies in future responsibly, just with the assumption that everything that the Americans could bring to the table, they will bring to the table just because they signed on to NATO. It's simply, that would be irresponsible. And that is the key capacity that the Americans could bring, is that they don't have, relatively speaking, a huge amount of force by American standards in Europe, but they have the capacity to increase that by orders of magnitude if they choose. And the question is whether or not they choose. So in terms of the Americans pulling out, they could reduce troops some. They already have, relatively speaking, a small number of ground forces in the NATO area. They have some air forces, but from what we can see here in Ukraine, the Americans have not committed combat aircraft to the NATO increase of air security along its eastern frontier. That's not confirmed, but that's what our information says. So already there seems to be a reluctance by the Americans to commit to this intensified protection of the eastern frontier of NATO's airspace. So a reduction is a reduction of a capacity that's not committed to a certain extent.
Right. And just to clarify one thing, I mean, a technicality, right? The military committee is NATO's highest military body, right? And it provides advice to the North Atlantic Council. So how do decisions or recommendations from the military committee translate into concrete action on the ground?
Another excellent question, because what you're talking about ultimately is the degree to which a NATO decision is going to be carried out by independent sovereign states. If that NATO committee comes to the conclusion that, for instance, there must be a greater density of air defense systems along Poland's border with Ukraine and Belarus, those systems have to come from somewhere. And the discussion about who's going to pay for those systems, who's going to donate those systems, who's going to man those systems, that's bilateral talks between the nations involved. And it can be quite complicated. In the Ukraine's example, for instance, there's been Patriot systems that have they've come from Germany. They've been partially financed by the Netherlands, and some of the missiles have come from America, and others apparently have come from Israel. And you're going to have a similar type of complex negotiation going on for any kind of real increase of capacity that the NATO committee might suggest is necessary. So it's doable, but it happens, but it's not simple.
Right, and over the past several weeks, we've been discussing these increased airspace violations, and throughout Europe, and some countries, such as Denmark, have been quite careful not to point a finger at Russia prematurely, so to speak. So, why do you think this? Is it excessive caution, and if so, why?
Well, I'm sitting in Kyiv, and there's just been a very big Russian missile and drone raid today. There are 4 people dead. The Russians fired apparently dozens of missiles, launched hundreds of drones. They attacked the city intensively. And from the perspective in Ukraine, there's only one way to deal with that, and that's to shoot everything down and be as aggressive in your defensive response as possible. That's the Ukrainian position after many years of war. In Denmark, for instance, they're a country at peace, and they have to be, first of all, very careful not to get ahead of what the NATO states in general are willing to do. And they have to speak not to a population that's been at war for years, but a population in a democratic country that is at peace. And it's not possible for a government simply to announce, okay, we're going to war tomorrow. There's nothing you can do about it. It's a democracy. And so the idea that there is a threat and steps must be taken to deal with the threat has to be sold over time to the voters who are going to pay for it all. So naturally, the Danish government, for instance, is very cautious about making an assertion that is not absolutely confirmed. It's not just they don't want to pick an unnecessary confrontation with the Russians right at this particular moment in time. They have their own voters and their own taxpayers to think about.
Right, and since you're based in Kyiv, what statements from that meeting in Riga will be the most consequential for Ukraine, in your view?
any statement that takes Russian aggression seriously and as something that is a constant and that would not be expected to be changing anytime soon. I think that would be the kind of statement from the Kyiv point of view that the Ukrainians would like to see the most. From their perspective, the Russian threat is real, and it's very dangerous, and it cannot be put off or ignored. NATO being at peace is in a different position, and the more that the NATO states could come to see the Russian threat the way the Ukrainians see it, well, obviously the Ukrainians, I think, would see that that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. And just to follow up on this recent attack on Kyiv and Zaporizhia, we've all been wondering how Vladimir Putin is going to react to recent statements by Donald Trump. So do you think that this is his reaction, this escalation?
Possibly, but it's really more, I think, a decision by the Kremlin and Putin not to change existing policy. Their policy for years now has been to conduct something approximating a terror bombing campaign against Ukraine, although they do absolutely target military targets. But it's also clearly intended to intimidate the Ukrainian population and to attempt to reduce the Ukrainian population's willingness to resist the Russian invasion. It's not been successful so far, but that is the express policy of the Russian military leadership, and that simply isn't changing. So it's really the message that Putin is sending with this strike, and it's really not just him, but the military leadership is nothing has changed from our side. We have blasted the Ukrainians before. We will keep on doing it. You can't stop it, and we think that it will be an effective policy.
Mm-hmm. And thus far, we've been discussing some postulates and wishes of the Baltic states, but of course, NATO is a larger alliance. So I wanted to ask you, how do you think it will reconcile different member states' priorities and sort of ensure the resources, right, to implement that?
Well, the easy answer is they'll do it with difficulty. But on the one hand, it's a very large organization with a lot of different members. The members have different interests. A few of the members are really, at least their governments are, they oppose active resistance to Russia. I'm talking about Hungary and Slovakia. They see the basically collaboration with Russia is a better policy, and that needs to somehow be worked out within the framework of NATO and as they develop a common defense policy. That being said, there are nations within NATO, I think led by Poland, but not only, that have whose national leadership has decided that the Russian threat is real and that it cannot be wished away. There must be serious actions taken, and so it'll be a negotiation between countries, for instance, like Poland, like the Baltic states, like the Scandinavian states, that see the Russian, and it's not just them, but that see the Russian threat because of their geography and their history also, as real and salient, and with countries like, let's say, France or Spain, which are further away, for whom the Russian threat is not a real day-to-day issue, but are NATO members, long-standing, and who are a part of the European family. And there'll be a debate about how that family could get together on a common policy. And the more members involved, the more complicated the debate.
Stefan Korshak, Defense Correspondent, Kyiv Post, thank you so much, sir, for being with us this morning, and do stay safe.
Thank you very much, and you have a great day.
And thank you for watching World Talks. Please stay tuned for more.